Today on Mid-Maryland Votes, we're joined by Jake Scott, high school math teacher, property developer, and CEO of TNT Management. Our conversation spans the federal takeover of law enforcement in D.C., the National Guard's role in that, immigration, the economy, and America's growing polarization. It's a wide-ranging discussion between people with different perspectives, brought together in the spirit of respect and open dialogue, which is what makes Mid-Maryland Votes special. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me as always is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
And we have a very special guest tonight. We have Jake Scott. He is the CEO of TNT Management Company. He is also a high school math teacher, which I'm sure has a lot of its own stories, Jake. But please welcome to the program.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Is there anything else about you that you'd like people to know?
I am a happy husband and father of three. I have two daughters. I was a girl dad for 16 years, and then all of a sudden, God blessed me with a young junior, Jacob Scott Jr. He's just turned 5 months. So
that's awesome. What a blessing for you. But hey,
I love it.
You know, Jake, they didn't warn me, dude. You know, I knew that I would love my sons, but nobody ever warned me how my daughter was going to completely steal my heart.
Oh, absolutely.
They don't warn you, dude.
It's a beautiful thing, man. I love my girls, and my wife wanted a son, and I said, well, you know what? We can pray about it and make it happen. But
and you were willing to give it the old college try.
I was willing to give it the college try, man. That's nothing beats a failure but a try.
Right. You just got to keep on trying until God blesses you, right? Well, listen, we want to talk about some subjects tonight, and we know that you have a personal input. You live down the D.C. area. Is that correct?
I do. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. I'm a real estate investor as well. The majority of my portfolio is in Washington, D.C.
A man who develops real estate in that area. What is the overall climate of DC? I happen to love DC. I think it's a great city.
It's a mixed bag. First of all, my properties I have property in Northeast, I have property in Southeast, and I have property in Northwest. So I have nothing in Southwest. Okay. The city is broken up into 4 quadrants, and so most of the criminal activity that Trump was trying to address was primarily in Southeast, partly in Northeast as well. But, so the areas that the Guard has gone into, first of all, there's an air of, uniqueness, like, whoa, the Guard is here. It's kind of interesting. If you happen to see them, it's encouraging, like, whoa, the Guard. Prior to the Guard, we had ICE come in, So ICE was more of a factor than the Guard. And ICE is not unique to DC. ICE was, I live in Silver Spring, Maryland. ICE was in Langley Park, which is like little, very high Hispanic population, very high immigrant, undocumented immigrant population, I should say. Sure, I would say ICE was a larger factor because you saw ICE raids happening all over the place, and they were far more dramatic. Now the Guard has come in, and the Guard has a nice air to them, but I think that people didn't want the Guard coming in. So the feel is mixed. If you were in an area where crime was knocking on your door, there's an air of relief. If you were not, let's say you were in Adams Morgan and a Guard happened to be there, people are like protesting, saying, get out of here. And so
Adams Morgan being a more wealthy neighborhood.
Adams Morgan is a more wealthy.
So I guess one distinction you may be getting at is that in the areas where the crime is highest, there was a more positive view of the National Guard, and in the areas where crime was lowest is where the protests against the Guard were occurring.
Great summary, and it makes me wonder, why were they even there in those areas where, like, some areas they weren't needed. You have a handful who really are excited about this assignment, but there's a large number who really aren't excited about the assignment. They're going in. Kids are being disrespectful. It's bad in some areas, I would say. So if a kid is just sitting out on the porch, a group of kids sitting out loitering, and the guard walks in or MPD walks in. These guys have very little respect for the law, and they'll insult them. They'll what we call rank or Joan. It tears at the strings, the heartstrings of the people. It annoys them, and they want to retaliate. But there's only little that you can do.
And another aspect to you
Yeah,
is that you are a public school teacher.
I am.
Yep, and I may add an award-winning math teacher. So
I am. Yep. I appreciate that.
Where were
And
you when I was going through school, Jake?
one of the challenges now, high undocumented immigrant populations. So when we came back, there were a number of students who had self-deported, or dad had been deported, or different situations that had to be dealt with. And so that's pretty sad to see and be a part of.
What's your overall feeling about that? The missing students and the missing families.
Right is right. I think that what I appreciate about this administration is the fact that they are taking steps to, at some point, the immigration system has to be corrected. Now, what steps do you take? I mean, traditionally, what has happened is they said, okay, if you're already here, let's figure something out so you can stay here and blah, blah, blah. However, with this administration, they're like, look, we're getting you all out. That's the sense that I get. If you're not documented, we're getting you out. I was very surprised to see the raid on the Korean, the Kia, what is it, Hyundai plant. So,
yes,
hundreds of South Koreans were deported,
and I believe they were here legally, is what the issue was, and yet they were still taken
and
to be deported.
I think initially they came legally and overstayed. I mean, that's the sense that I got, but nonetheless, it was interesting to see that it's been pretty much indiscriminate. So that was
So if you're here illegally, you're an option for
deportation.
deporting, regardless of your race, creed, color, or background or country of origin.
I haven't seen any Europeans being deported.
ICE, when they go in somewhere, they actually do have a target. And so they know who they're going after. There is, quote unquote, a method to the madness. However, and this is where the confusion comes in, is that they will also take everyone who is with that individual potentially.
Allegedly, ICE says that they're only going over after violent or criminal elements. But in that sweep, there may be collaterals, people who are in the country illegally that get swept up in that raid. That is their take on the issue. I don't know the validity of that or not.
Yeah, I think that there were two things. There were two things that were announced. One was that they're specifically targeting violent individuals, and another statement was there was an announced quota of 3,000 per, I forget what the time period, week, day, month, but over a defined time period. And once they had been so effective at getting out the initial round, they were like, okay, we still have a quota because there's still many undocumented immigrants. So they started reaching into the trenches of individuals who were here paying taxes, law abiding, and even those who have families, and deporting them.
You talked about earlier, before this administration, there were pathways to citizenship given
Yes,
to people that were here illegally. How
yes.
does that affect the real estate trades in the areas that you are developing? The whole immigration and deportation. How's it affecting you guys?
That's an excellent question. One, the labor force. I've not come across a labor force, or it's very rare to come across a labor force that doesn't have a significant Hispanic contingent. And of that Hispanic contingent, a significant portion is probably undocumented. I was just speaking with one of the other hockey parents yesterday, and she was speaking about how her house was under renovation, and then all of a sudden there was a raid, and not at her house, but as a result of the raid, there were people who were afraid to go to work. There were people who were deported. And so ultimately the workforce was cut in half, and the project got delayed. And so one of my workers who is here with a visa, he's documented, and ultimately you're going to run into a situation where you need some additional help. And so, hey, do you know someone who does XYZ? Yeah, I know someone who does electrical. Okay, good. Can you bring them in? And these you're paying 1099, but this guy that comes in is not documented, for example.
Can you explain that as far as like a businessman paying a 1099? How does that work?
A 1099 is independent contractor. So this guy, I have an employee, but these additional workers that may come to help out in unique situations, they are not my employees. So they come in, I'm going to pay them. I would just collect a work ID number or social security number. I'll pay them, and at the end, I'll file taxes stating that I paid for work completed.
So when you employ a 1099 employee, is it your responsibility to validate that they're in the country legally?
It is not, because what happens is you ask a person to complete an I-9. You collect documentation. So a lot of these individuals who are not documented have access to, in the black market, social security number, tax ID numbers. That isn't my responsibility. It is my responsibility.
By the way, when I say you, I mean in businesses in
Or
general.
I'm saying that's not an employer's responsibility, because you're limited. So if I ask you for this information and you provide information and it checks out, I have to submit information to the IRS. It doesn't have a picture with it, for example. I can't verify with fingerprints and all that stuff that you are who you say you are. I'm going to take your word for it. I'm going to take the documents the information that you submit to me, and I'll submit that to the IRS.
Yeah, another question that I have is, in your experience as a teacher, with the students that you see, what is their reaction? Because they live in the area where they live, around DC, what have you. But what is their reaction to National Guard and the federal takeover of the police department?
Well, a lot of it, I mean, if I was to use one word, it would be fear. Fear is the predominant emotion.
Fear in the citizens of DC?
The citizens of DC, I would say, once again, I think that the unique positive experience has been those who've had crime at their front door. Other than that, I mean, Washington, DC has been under gentrification for the last 10 years. So one of the property that I'm spending the most time at right now, for example, I have a black neighbor who's there before I purchased the house. So that's over 10 years. They're residual, if you will. It's not been gentrified at that house. But besides that house, young white couple, professional black couple, I mean, Teslas, Starbucks. I mean, there's a school right around the corner, an elementary school that is just a hub. And homes are selling for millions, $1 million. One just sold for just over $1 million. And I bought this house for $350,000. So that area is gentrified. Now, how do they feel about it? I mean, I've not heard anything negative, but I think I would imagine that overall by now, especially, people have gotten used to it. The MPD or National Guard or whoever comes to that area, the feds come to that area. So there's the initial, bumping of heads, but after that's over, you learn the kid's name, right? You learn the kid's name, and then eventually you ask the kid a couple of questions, and you start this. All of a sudden, this person becomes a human being. This FBI agent or this MPD or whoever it is also becomes a human being. And I've seen some of those exchanges, which has been encouraging. So relationships beginning to form.
So when you say fear, particularly among the students, the children in the community, what do you attribute that to? What is it that they're afraid of?
First of all, I think that young people aren't used to seeing so much of a presence of authority, right? And a lot of trauma is passed down. A lot of fears that you have came from your parents. We learn what to be afraid of, or from other people in the neighborhood. We learn what to like, what to dislike, what to eat, what to not eat. And so I think that everyone loves firefighters. Everyone hates police, right? So I think that there were police, and now more police and more authorities. And so I think that was the root of the fear.
and that the fear that is in the students, like you said, that is just kind of passed down generationally, that it has not shown itself to be warranted up to this point in time.
Well, so there are a number of things that are working right now. One is ICE. So it's hard to parse it because there's ICE, which is still rounding people up and still deporting people. That's one factor. The National Guard is a completely separate factor. And now National Guards with guns is different from National Guards going out picking up trash, right? So if you're asking, has it been effective? Yes, obviously it's been effective. Crime has gone down. Is it efficient? I don't think it's efficient. And secondly, is it sustainable? I don't think it's sustainable. Should the mayor take advantage of it? In my opinion, yes. I think that the mayor should, because we're creatures of habit. So if you can calm crime for 30 days, 60 days, your hardened criminals will be arrested or relocate. Your soft criminals will develop other habits. They'll think about other things to do. So I do think it's important for her, the mayor, and even those in neighboring cities to take advantage of it, because if you only do DC, one of the posts I put up, if you only have it in DC and you don't have it in Maryland, that's like exterminating one room of your house.
Right.
It's just going to relocate. So all the criminals in DC have a cousin who lives in either Maryland or Philadelphia or, and they'll relocate. And so I think that, yes, take advantage of it. One, you already paid for it because of the tariffs. The government has collected billions of dollars in tariffs. Allow that money to go towards bringing down crime. Why not? And in the meantime, if you're complicit with the president's efforts, perhaps he'd be willing to reallocate some of the money that he took away from social programs, because I think that social programs are more effective because it's over a period of time. So
I think, Jake, you're hitting on a really key point. I think Mayor Bowser did a great job of leading through that time. She cooperated with the feds. She, within her leadership spectrum, I think she did very well. She got a lot of flack from people on the far left for cooperating with Trump, for saying, hey, crime's going down. And those social program dollars do flow afterwards. The problem is, when you fight the feds, they're not going to give you any of that social dollars afterwards. If you're not going to cooperate with ICE, if you're not going to do your due diligence, then they're going to be like, well, we'll send those dollars to people who do.
And I get that. I understand that. I mean, I put up a post. I said, look, why fight it? I mean, I do think that the mayors should take advantage of the support. Like I said, I don't think it's efficient. I don't think it's the most efficient way to go about it, but something is better than nothing.
It was specifically for 30 days. Those 30 days are up. It was from August 11th to September 10th. Local control has been given back to the DC Police Department, the Mayor Bowser.
Yes.
And they are continuing to invite work with from the federal police. So there is. However, they've also announced that they are not going to work with ICE anymore now that the 30 days is up. Reported crimes dropped 18%. Now, here's what I find most interesting is the crimes dropped 18%, but the most violent crimes essentially went away. So murders, which are averaging this year over 3 murders a week in DC, dropped to 0 for over a week. I don't know if that's even continued or when it stopped, but for over a week, dropped to 0. And in a news conference, the mayor was saying that carjackings, which have been just one of the worst crimes that have been skyrocketing last several years, dropped by 87%.
Yes.
And so the crimes that are left, by all means, are crimes and shouldn't be there, but they are far less damaging. But it didn't involve Gestapo-type military tactics. What does that mean in the larger scheme of things, that in cities like DC or Baltimore or any of these others we can, the president has mentioned, Memphis, Chicago, What does it mean that for decades, the messaging was whatever to justify it, and suddenly we see that it was that easy to fix?
Okay, great question. The key word that I would focus on is fix. Uh, I mean, if I have a leaky pipe, I may put some glue on it and it stops leaking for 30 minutes, right? For a defined period of time, but is it sustainable? And I don't think it's sustainable. For one, it's expensive. Two, if you I know that you're going to be here for 30 days, that's like inviting your mother-in-law, the mother-in-law, if you will. I love my mother-in-law, but inviting your mother-in-law for a week or for a month, okay, I can deal with that. And so the crime lies dormant for 30 days with an understanding that once these 30 days are up, we can resume. And so, and the other thing is, I think that carjackings, one thing that we should know about carjackings, if you looked at the age of most of those who do carjackings, uh, they're school age, middle school and high school, not even necessarily high school age, middle and high school age. The timing coincided with the beginning of school. So a lot of these young kids were bored, nothing to do. Now school resumes, we go back to school. Okay. And so that is another factor. Not to take anything away from the work that was done by the authorities. Some guests at one of my Airbnbs, they were from out of town and they were sitting out not on the porch, but the curb. These were a group of white guys that came in from North Carolina, there for a groom honoring and or bachelor party, and some young kids pulled up, hey man, blah blah blah, and it didn't take more than 3 minutes for them to slap the guys around, take their wallets and phones and everything. And I get a call and I go over to the Airbnb and I'm like, oh my goodness. But one of the guys who stood up to the kids, he said, man, this kid couldn't have been any more than 11. A lot of these things are being perpetrated by just kids.
Right.
They're kids. I think the presence has helped, definitely has helped. I know that some who are in organized crime are lying dormant and waiting for the time to return to their activities. But I think it's great. I think it's a good thing. I think it's inefficient though, and I think that it's unsustainable. And I hope that they look for a more long-term solution, which includes investing into, like when I was at Cardozo, for example, I met a program, an AmeriCorps program called City Year. The young people come from all around the country and they're placed into DC public schools to assist with the teachers. And I met these guys, and these young people were phenomenal. They're younger, they're in their 25, 20, 18, 19, and they're able to connect with the kids. That was super important when I was the math department at chair at Cardozo, because those kids were pushed in to the classroom and assist the teacher. They
Where
were
were these workers coming in from?
all over the place. They're all over the country. So they come in and they stay for 1 year. It's a subsidiary of AmeriCorps. And so when I
AmeriCorps is an
learned about,
excellent program.
yeah, excellent program. And so they would get hired. They would work for. I mean, they would get like $1,000 a month, 1,500 a month. And so when I heard about their plight, I was like, hey, look, you guys, I'm so impressed with what you're doing. I'm going to dedicate one of my properties. I'm going to just redo it, make it affordable for you guys. Ended up being great for them and great for me. I've worked with these guys for 10 years. I'm sorry. Yeah, just about 10 years. And this year their funding got cut. So that was devastating, because I know how important those young people are in DC public schools. To have that removed, it's challenging. It's challenging. I know that the DC public schools suffered as a result of that. I think that's one example of the social programs that were cut off. On the flip side, I have some Section 8 properties, right? So I'm not. I have one. With Section 8, oftentimes when you start off, the person may be paying $30 and the government is paying the rest. If they make any advancements financially, their portion increases and the government portion may decrease a little bit. As a landlord, you always hate that because you're like, man, I know that this person's portion went up from $30 to $150, and they're not going to pay that $150. Well, I have one of my Section 8 tenants. This individual hadn't been paying their portion ever. They hadn't been paying their portion. And the person didn't have a job. They got their rent paid by, their utilities paid by some other entity like the Catholic Church or something like that. But all of a sudden, the individual called and said, hey, I got a job now. What happened? Well, I think that I would attribute it to the heat of this administration. Some people need that. So there are two sides to every coin. So, I'm saddened about what happened with AmeriCorps. I'm encouraged by this Section 8 tenant getting a job and even a thought of Section 8 having time limits, because I think that that's a positive thing.
Yeah, the discipline in the schools is definitely something that that has suffered in the last 5 or 10 years. It appears. I mean, if you look at the statistics, there are a number of children acting out, and they basically cause such a disruption that we're losing teachers. We're bleeding teachers.
Absolutely,
they're leaving the profession in droves because they don't feel appreciated. They feel underpaid and not supported by administration when it comes to disciplinary matters.
Absolutely. And and if the teachers aren't successful with them, when I see police officers all the time, I say, look, if I'm not successful with them, they become your problem. And that's the thing. I mean, I think that city year program was so vital because it could be one. I remember my first year as a teacher. I remember being at BCC High School and having an altercation with a student who didn't want to take a test that I was about to administer. And we got into it. And the kid got up and was about to walk out of the classroom, and my cooperating teacher said, hey, sit down. And he intervened. The next day, when I had to go back to that school, I sat out in my car and I cried. And that could have been the end of my teaching career. However, programs like those that go in and support make a huge difference. And so that ripple effect, there isn't any statistic for that. There's not a stat for Jake Scott is in his car crying and not coming to school. That wasn't captured in any statistics. But those things are happening on a daily basis when City Year was present. And there are other social programs like that have been cut. Now, the National Guard, of course, they're going to come in. Now, my comparison would be if I had roaches on the floor and I'm slinging a sledgehammer, I'm going to kill some roaches for sure, but it's not the most efficient. How long can I do that? I'm going to tire out. I'm going to kill some roaches, but
They're also going to break your floor up too.
And I'm going to break my floor. And so Chicago, for example, where the youngsters are anticipating the National Guard coming in, I pray that there's no violence that happens as a result of someone saying, okay, they're coming here, they're going to disrupt my block, disrupt my economy, whatever, and decides to take out a National Guard member.
I think that's inevitable. I think that the criminal element, they don't like their money stepped on.
Yeah.
And if you're going to step on their money, they're going to do, there is eventually going to be pushback. There's no doubt about it.
If I'm not able to push forward a better way, I shouldn't critique what's happening, right? I do know that the social programs have helped, especially as it relates to the schools.
I think many people in the middle, Jake, they believe that there's a two-pronged approach to crime.
Yes.
One is positive enforcement, but the other one are social programs to get kids. Like you said, the majority of the kids doing the carjackings are kids. They're kids. 11 to 16-year-old children. I mean, they're acting out for various reasons. And I'm not saying that I am making excuses for their crime.
Yes.
But there has to be programs to help these kids become members of society, and it benefits all of society to meet these kids where they're at and try to bring them along.
Yeah, the family structure. I know that this is one of the things that Charlie Kirk referenced a lot. Thing that he mentioned that was very good was he mentioned that social programs should promote family unity. Currently, I know that there are a lot of social programs under HUD that discourage family. Uh, Mom and kids are on this voucher, and if there's a man present or if you get married, that jeopardizes that voucher. So there's oftentimes a man that comes in and he's off the books or under the table, and not a part of the family. And I think that that's unfortunate.
And what I have noticed is that there are many programs in many areas of society that have popped up over the decades where they do create incentives for bad behavior. And I think probably the single most important one is what you just mentioned, how we've created incentives for there to not be a father or husband in the home. And I think the effect of that, the waterfall cascading effect, has been huge. Even though it is a crime and people need to be held accountable, I do not believe that those middle school age children are evil of heart, are so hardened that they are truly of a criminal mindset. But the question is, what created that? And what a lot of people have pointed to is that laws have been put in place that make it so that was truly violent offenders, such as carjackers, beyond 16 and younger, can't really be prosecuted. And so as a result, it has created an incentive for career criminals to essentially recruit and train young children to become criminals.
Correct. And I think that as they're with us, whether we like it or not. And as long as there's poverty and kids born into poverty and we don't address it, we're going to continue to have that. And so I don't think the solution is bigger prisons. I think that these kids are salvageable, and I think that we have to work to put our heads together.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's any throwaway human beings. And the truth is that, the welfare system as it stands discourages the basic building block of our society, which is families. And that
Yes,
transcends black, white, Asian, Hispanic. This is the building block that makes good people. It's
yes,
good families. And if the welfare system rewards families to be broken in half, it's broken. It's not working.
absolutely. I agree 100%. I agree 100%. And I'm glad to see that steps are being taken. And that's one critique that I have of the left, the Democratic Party, is you can't go in to save people all the time. Like sometimes the salvation is a conversation like get up, pick up your mat and walk, you know.
Mhm.
And so
Jake, I call that the bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah,
absolutely,
exactly.
absolutely. I remember I got into an argument with someone because I had a Section 8 tenant that was not paying her rent, and I said, "Listen, you have to leave. You have to leave. You're being financed by the government, and you don't even have the decency to pay your portion. No, you have to leave. You have to understand that there are consequences." The individual that I was speaking with said, "That's cruel," and no, that's life. I have a family to feed. No, I'm not. This is not a charity case. Now I have some properties that have been allocated for veterans, but that's not this property. You know what I'm saying? You have means. You've made a decision to not pay your rent. You've taken my kindness for weakness. That's a mistake. I need you to leave. And
Yeah, the
so,
criteria for me is if they can't pay their rent, but they can pay their cable, their cell phone, their nails, their hair,
yeah,
various things, then it's not a matter of poverty. It's a matter of
yeah.
priorities.
And this was not a. I assessed the situation. It was not a matter of poverty. It was poor planning and misaligned priorities. And so I
Mhm.
said no.
Well,
So
Jake, we have really enjoyed. We have gone extra overtime with you as a guest. You are an amazing guest. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, your perspective is invaluable to us, and we really appreciate you being here tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate just being able to have dialogue. I think it's important, very, very important. And so
I think
thank
it's the most important thing. We used to be a society where anybody from any background could talk to each other in a reasonable way, exchange ideas, maybe even agree to disagree, and then have a beer or a cup of coffee afterwards.
I appreciate you guys.
Can
Thanks
you
for doing this.
can you agree to come back out and visit us
Oh,
again?
absolutely, man. Absolutely. I think we have to put our heads together and figure out some solutions. And
I agree. We're
I love to be
better
part of that.
together as United States of America, as a country, as a people. We are better together.
Absolutely. Thanks, brothers.
Thank you, Jake. This has
Appreciate it.
been Mark Flynn from Mid Maryland Votes, my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
and our very special guest, Jake Scott. Thank you for joining us.
That was Jake Scott on Mid Maryland Votes, a thoughtful conversation on tough issues handled with honesty and respect. This is exactly what we need more of, discussions where people listen, share ideas, and learn from one another, and that is exactly what Mid Maryland Votes is all about. Thanks for joining us, and remember, like, follow, and share for more content like this, and we'll see you next time on Mid Maryland Votes.